The Forgotten Wolf Temple rejected every alpha, but opened its gates for my healing magic. Welcome, everyone. Before we step into today's unforgettable story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It only takes a second, costs nothing, and it helps us continue creating powerful, emotional, and cinematic stories for you. Your support truly inspires everything we do. Before the story begins, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. We always love seeing our community come together from different countries and time zones. Now, without further delay, let's dive into today's story. The strongest hands are not the ones that force open sacred doors, but the ones worthy enough to be welcomed. The oldest story in the Northern Territories was never about the Alpha Kings who conquered kingdoms or the warriors who returned from impossible battles. It was about a forgotten temple hidden beyond the Frostpine Mountains, where ancient stones stood untouched by time and moonlight lingered long after dawn. Every generation believed the same legend. Somewhere beyond the endless forests, beyond rivers that shimmered like silver beneath the night sky, stood the Forgotten Wolf Temple, a sanctuary built before the first packs ever swore loyalty to an alpha. It was said that the temple had only one purpose. It waited. It did not wait for the strongest. It did not wait for the bravest. It waited for someone the world would never expect. For nearly 900 years, every Alpha King who ruled the Northern Territories had attempted to enter its gates. Some came wearing crowns forged from black iron. Others arrived surrounded by thousands of loyal wolves, believing power alone could command respect from ancient stone. None succeeded. The enormous white gates remained silent, refusing every ruler with the same quiet certainty. No roar shook the mountains. No lightning split the sky. The temple simply ignored them, as though they had never existed. Over centuries, countless scholars searched for answers. Priests studied forgotten scrolls. Historians argued over faded symbols carved into weathered tablets. Some insisted the temple protected unimaginable treasures. Others believed it imprisoned an ancient curse too dangerous for the modern world. Eventually, hope faded into myth. Parents told the story to curious children before bedtime, while seasoned hunters laughed at anyone foolish enough to search for ruins hidden beneath endless forests. Even the royal court dismissed it as little more than a beautiful fairy tale meant to inspire dreamers. Elena Ashford had heard those stories since she was a little girl, although nobody expected someone like her to care about legends. She was an Omega, quiet by nature and overlooked by nearly everyone in her village. While young alphas trained with swords and competed for honor, Elena spent her mornings gathering herbs, studying forgotten remedies, and comforting injured animals that wandered near the edge of the woods. The villagers appreciated her kindness, yet they never mistook it for greatness. To them, healing was useful but ordinary, something gentle people did while stronger wolves protected the world. Elena rarely argued. She had learned long ago that proving kindness was more difficult than proving strength. Even so, there were moments she could never explain. Sometimes wilted flowers stood upright again after she touched the soil beneath them. Exhausted birds rested in her hands for only a few minutes before flying away stronger than before. Once, an ancient oak tree that everyone believed dead blossomed with pale silver leaves after she rested beneath its branches during a spring rain. She never spoke about those moments. Strange gifts often attracted fearful whispers, and she preferred peaceful silence over unwanted attention. Then everything changed on the morning King Cale Thornridge entered her village. His arrival silenced every conversation as riders dressed in midnight cloaks crossed the wooden bridge beneath fluttering royal banners. The Alpha King had not come seeking tribute, nor had he come for war. He had come searching for the Forgotten Wolf Temple. None of the villagers realized that before the sun would set, an ancient legend would awaken, and a forgotten destiny would quietly choose the one soul no kingdom had ever considered worthy. King Cale Thornridge did not arrive with the loud celebration most rulers expected. He entered Ash Hollow beneath a gray autumn sky, accompanied by only a handful of royal guards whose disciplined silence seemed heavier than the polished armor they wore. The villagers gathered along the narrow main road, bowing respectfully as the riders passed, but curiosity lingered in every glance. Rumors had spread across the Northern Territories for weeks. Some believed the king had discovered a forgotten map leading to an ancient sanctuary. Others whispered that strange lights had appeared above the Frostpine Mountains for the first time in centuries. No one truly knew why the Alpha King had abandoned the comfort of his capital to travel so far north. Elena watched from the doorway of the small healing cottage where she had worked since she was 16. Bundles of lavender, sage, and mountain mint hung from the wooden beams, filling the air with a gentle fragrance that made anxious visitors breathe a little easier. Her hands carefully wrapped fresh herbs around the ankle of an elderly farmer who smiled with quiet gratitude before walking away with surprising confidence. The old man thanked her warmly, but once he disappeared into the crowd, another woman stepped inside carrying a restless child whose fever had finally broken after Elena had cared for him through the night. The grateful mother embraced her, yet before leaving, she said the same words Elena had heard her entire life. "You have such a gentle gift. If only it had been something greater." Elena answered with her usual smile, although those words always settled heavily in her heart. Kindness was appreciated. Greatness belonged to someone else. Outside, the village square grew unusually still as King Kale dismounted beside the weathered stone fountain at its center. He was taller than Elena had imagined, with calm silver eyes that missed very little. Unlike the exaggerated stories told around winter fires, there was no arrogance in his expression. Instead, he carried the quiet patience of someone who had spent years searching for an answer that refused to reveal itself. The village elder welcomed him with respectful formality before presenting faded records collected over generations, each one claiming to hold clues about the hidden sanctuary. Kale examined every page with careful attention, yet each ended with the same disappointing conclusion. The trail vanished somewhere beyond Frostpine Ridge. There was never another sign. As the afternoon drifted toward evening, Elena carried fresh water toward the gathering outside the meeting hall. She hoped only to leave the pitcher and quietly return to her work. Instead, a sudden breeze scattered several fragile parchment maps across the ground before anyone could catch them. Without thinking, she knelt to gather the delicate pages before they could tear against the rough stone. One map slipped beneath her fingertips, revealing a faded symbol unlike any she had seen before. It resembled a crescent moon cradling the roots of an ancient tree. The moment her fingers brushed the drawing, warmth spread gently through the paper. The faded ink brightened for a single heartbeat before returning to normal. No one else appeared to notice except King Kale. Their eyes met only briefly across the courtyard. He said nothing, yet something thoughtful settled behind his calm expression. Elena quickly returned the map and stepped away, embarrassed by the unexpected moment. She believed it had simply been a trick of the afternoon sunlight. Kale was not so certain. For the first time since beginning his impossible search, he wondered whether the answer he had crossed kingdoms to find had been quietly living in the smallest village on the map all along. The following morning arrived wrapped in cool mountain mist, and the forest beyond Ash Hollow seemed quieter than anyone could remember. King Kale and his small company prepared to leave before sunrise, guided by faded maps, fragmented journal entries, and stories that contradicted one another at every turn. Even so, the determination in his eyes never wavered. He had spent years following scattered clues that every scholar dismissed, and he refused to abandon the search now that he stood closer than ever before. The village elder insisted on sending several experienced hunters as guides, but every one of them warned that Frostpine Ridge changed those who entered it. Trails disappeared without reason. Familiar landmarks shifted with the seasons. Travelers often returned believing they had walked in circles despite marching for miles. Elena listened quietly while preparing small bundles of dried herbs and clean bandages for the expedition. She never expected to join them. Her place had always been behind, caring for those who needed comfort after others returned from adventure. Just as the riders prepared to depart, one of the elderly women who had known Elena since childhood stepped forward and placed an old wooden pendant into her hands. The carving was simple, shaped like the same crescent moon embracing the roots of a tree that Elena had glimpsed on the mysterious map. The old woman smiled with surprising certainty. "Your mother asked me to give you this when the mountains finally called your name." Elena stared at the pendant in confusion. "My mother never spoke about the mountains." The woman gently closed Elena's fingers around the smooth wood. Perhaps she knew the day would come when words were no longer necessary. Before Elena could ask another question, King Kale approached. His expression remained calm, yet there was unmistakable curiosity behind his silver eyes. "Yesterday, you touched a map that has remained unchanged for generations," he said quietly. Something responded. "I saw it with my own eyes." Elena lowered her gaze, uncertain how to explain something she did not understand herself. "I thought it was only sunlight." Kale looked toward the distant mountain peaks rising beyond the endless pines. "I have spent years searching for ordinary explanations. None of them have opened forgotten doors." The village elder stepped between them with respectful hesitation. "Your Majesty, the journey ahead is dangerous. There is no reason for a healer to follow soldiers into abandoned wilderness." Before Kale could answer, a cool breeze swept through the square, carrying with it the faint fragrance of pine and fresh rain, even though the sky remained perfectly clear. Elena felt the wooden pendant grow unexpectedly warm against her palm. At the same moment, every compass carried by the royal guards slowly rotated until each pointed toward the same distant valley. Confused murmurs spread among the group. One hunter unfolded the oldest map again, only to discover a narrow trail appearing where blank parchment had existed only yesterday. The faded ink shimmered softly before settling into clear lines that none of them had ever seen. Silence settled over the gathering. The path did not begin where the king stood. It began exactly where Elena stood. No one spoke for several long moments. Finally, Kale offered a gentle nod rather than a command. "I believe the mountain has already chosen its guide." Elena looked beyond the village toward the endless forest stretching beneath the pale morning sky. Fear whispered that she should remain where life was familiar, but another feeling, quiet and impossible to ignore, urged her forward. She tightened her fingers around the ancient pendant and took a single step onto the newly revealed trail, unaware that every step carried them closer to a secret the world had forgotten long before any alpha ever claimed a throne. The hidden trail wound deeper into Frostpine Ridge with a quiet confidence that no ordinary path could possess. It curved around towering evergreens, crossed crystal streams without bridges, and passed through fields where pale white flowers bloomed despite the cool autumn air. Every member of the royal company noticed the same strange detail. The trail never seemed disturbed by weather or time. Fallen leaves gathered beside it, but never covered it. Moss climbed ancient stones yet stopped precisely at its edges, as though the forest itself respected an invisible boundary. Elena walked near the front, still uncertain why the mysterious path continued to reveal itself beneath her feet. She was neither the strongest nor the wisest among them. She had never led an expedition, never sought forgotten legends, and certainly never imagined traveling beside an Alpha King whose name echoed across every kingdom. Yet with every mile, the warmth inside the wooden pendant resting against her chest grew steadier, almost like the calm rhythm of a heartbeat. Kale remained close enough to observe without intruding. He noticed that birds landed fearlessly near Elena while keeping their distance from everyone else. Small woodland animals appeared briefly between the trees before quietly disappearing again, never startled, never anxious. It was as though the wilderness recognized something within her long before any human could. By late afternoon, the forest suddenly opened into a breathtaking valley hidden between towering cliffs. Time itself seemed different there. Soft silver mist drifted across a perfectly still lake that reflected the sky with impossible clarity. Beyond the water stood a magnificent temple carved entirely from luminous white stone. Elegant pillars reached toward the heavens, covered in ancient symbols worn smooth by countless seasons. Ivy wrapped around graceful archways without damaging them, and crystal vines shimmered beneath gentle sunlight as though they carried their own quiet glow. Every traveler stopped where they stood, overwhelmed by the sight that generations had believed existed only in forgotten stories. One of the royal scholars whispered with trembling disbelief that every drawing preserved in the archives had underestimated its beauty. Another quietly removed his spectacles simply to make certain his eyes were not deceiving him. At the center of the valley stood two enormous stone gates rising nearly 40 feet into the air. Their surfaces displayed countless carvings of wolves standing beside healers beneath a radiant moon instead of warriors carrying weapons. Above the entrance rested the same symbol Elena had seen on the ancient map and worn around her neck since childhood. Kale slowly approached the gates, his expression filled with respect rather than expectation. Following traditions preserved through centuries, he placed one hand against the cool white stone. Nothing happened. He stepped back without frustration, allowing each royal guard, scholar, and hunter the same opportunity. One after another they approached with quiet hope, yet the gates remained completely still. No sound echoed across the valley. No symbol glowed. The temple simply refused to respond, just as every legend had promised. Silence settled over the valley once more. Elena never intended to step forward. She believed the search had ended exactly as history predicted. But as she turned to admire the peaceful lake, the pendant resting against her heart suddenly released a gentle warmth that spread through her entire body. Drawn by an instinct she could not explain, she walked slowly toward the towering entrance. She did not offer a prayer or speak ancient words she had never learned. She simply rested her fingertips against the cool stone with quiet humility. For one endless heartbeat, nothing changed. Then a soft silver light awakened beneath her hand. Ancient carvings illuminated one by one like stars appearing across the night sky. A deep, welcoming hum echoed through the valley as vines blossomed with brilliant white flowers. The great stone gates slowly parted for the very first time in nearly 9 centuries, and everyone watching realized they had not witnessed someone forcing open a forgotten sanctuary. They had witnessed the sanctuary recognizing the one it had been patiently waiting for all along. For several long moments, no one moved. The great stone gates stood fully open, revealing a sanctuary that had remained hidden from the world for almost 9 centuries. Cool air drifted outward carrying the delicate fragrance of wild jasmine, fresh cedar, and rain-soaked earth, as though the temple itself had been quietly breathing beneath the mountain while waiting for this single moment. Elena lowered her hand from the glowing stone, her heartbeat quickening as the silver light slowly faded from her fingertips. She looked toward King Kale, expecting questions she could not answer, but instead she found only quiet respect in his eyes. Without speaking, he stepped aside and gestured for her to enter first. It was not the gesture of a king commanding an ordinary citizen. It was the gesture of someone recognizing that the path ahead no longer belonged to him. Elena hesitated before crossing the threshold. The instant her foot touched the polished white floor inside the sanctuary, hundreds of crystal lanterns suspended high above awakened one after another, filling the enormous hall with soft moonlit radiance. Ancient murals stretched across towering walls, untouched by dust or decay. They did not depict mighty warriors claiming victory in glorious battles. Instead, they showed gentle healers placing their hands upon exhausted wolves, restoring dying forests, cleansing darkened rivers, and standing beside alpha leaders as trusted equals rather than servants. Every image challenged the history that generations had accepted as truth. The scholars followed carefully behind, astonished as they translated inscriptions carved into luminous marble. One elderly historian paused with trembling hands before reading the first complete passage anyone had seen in centuries. The strength of the pack shall never endure without the hands that restore what strength alone cannot preserve. Silence settled across the sanctuary once again. Those words were older than every kingdom that still existed, yet they carried a truth that felt timeless. As the company continued deeper into the temple, the hallway gradually opened into a breathtaking circular chamber unlike anything they had imagined. At its center stood an immense tree whose silver trunk shimmered with quiet life despite the passing of countless centuries. Its branches reached toward a ceiling carved to resemble a night sky, filled with glowing stars, while delicate white leaves drifted gently through the still air without ever touching the ground. Beneath the magnificent tree flowed clear water that circled its roots before disappearing into channels leading far beneath the mountain. Elena instinctively approached, feeling the same warmth that had guided her since leaving Ash Hollow. The closer she came, the brighter the wooden pendant around her neck became until it matched the gentle glow surrounding the ancient tree. She reached out carefully, resting her fingertips against the smooth silver bark. At once, ripples of pale light spread through every branch overhead. Images unlike ordinary memories unfolded around the chamber. She saw unknown healers wearing robes embroidered with the same crescent moon symbol. They were not performing ordinary healing. Their hands restored withered forests, lifted heavy sorrow from grieving hearts, purified ancient curses without raising a single weapon, and awakened forgotten places with quiet compassion alone. A gentle voice echoed through the chamber, neither distant nor frightening, but filled with patient warmth. The sacred restoration has returned. The last guardian has come home. Elena slowly opened her eyes as tears of quiet wonder gathered without her realizing it. She finally understood why simple remedies had never fully explained the gift she had carried since childhood. She had never possessed ordinary healing magic. She carried an ancient blessing far older than every throne, a power created not to conquer kingdoms, but to restore everything fear and time had nearly erased. As the final echoes of the ancient voice faded into silence, the chamber remained filled with a peaceful glow unlike anything the travelers had ever witnessed. No one rushed to speak. Even the royal scholars, who had spent their lives searching for forgotten truths, seemed unable to find words worthy of what had just unfolded before their eyes. King Kale looked toward Elena with quiet admiration, realizing that history had never hidden the temple to protect a treasure. It had hidden the truth until the right heart appeared to receive it. While everyone stood in silent wonder, one of the younger scholars wandered toward the outer edge of the circular chamber where dozens of marble tablets rested against the walls. Their surfaces were covered with symbols that slowly brightened as the temple awakened. Carefully brushing away centuries of settled dust, he began translating the nearest inscription aloud. Every guardian of sacred restoration shall be tested not by power, but by the choices of those who seek to possess that power. The words settled heavily across the chamber. Before anyone could reflect upon their meaning, footsteps echoed from the distant entrance hall. More voices followed, carried through the open gates by the still mountain air. Several noble advisors from the royal capital had finally reached the hidden valley. After following the expedition's trail, they entered with astonishment written across their faces, stopping only briefly to admire the magnificent sanctuary before their expressions slowly shifted into calculation. Their attention settled almost immediately upon Elena standing beneath the radiant silver tree. The eldest advisor stepped forward with a polished smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Your Majesty, this discovery changes everything. If the young healer truly possesses the ancient blessing, the kingdom must preserve it. She should return to the capital under royal protection, where scholars can study this remarkable gift for the benefit of every territory." Another advisor quickly agreed, speaking with carefully measured confidence. "Such power should never remain in the hands of an ordinary villager. It belongs where it can be properly directed." Elena quietly lowered her eyes. Those words sounded respectful, yet something about them reminded her of every moment she had been judged not as a person, but as something useful. Before she could answer, the gentle light surrounding the great silver tree began to dim. White leaves that had drifted peacefully through the chamber slowed until they rested motionless in the air. A deep vibration passed beneath the polished floor, not threatening, but solemn, as though the sanctuary itself had heard every word. The scholars immediately searched the nearby inscriptions, their expressions growing increasingly serious. One elderly historian finally spoke with quiet urgency. "The temple is responding. It recognizes intention. Sacred restoration cannot exist where compassion becomes possession." Elena instinctively placed one hand against the silver bark once more. Instead of drawing upon power, she simply closed her eyes and whispered from the deepest place in her heart, "I do not wish to own this gift. I only wish to help those who need it." The response was immediate. Brilliant silver light flowed gently through every branch above, filling the chamber with renewed warmth. The trembling beneath the floor disappeared. Clear water began flowing freely around the ancient roots once again, and the white leaves resumed their graceful dance through the air. Every advisor fell silent. The temple had answered without anger, without force, and without judgment. It had simply revealed that the greatest danger was never an ancient curse hidden beneath the mountain. It was the moment kindness became something people tried to control instead of protect. The chamber remained quiet after the temple restored its gentle radiance, but something had changed inside every person standing beneath the ancient silver tree. The advisors who had arrived believing they understood power no longer looked at the sanctuary with certainty. They looked at it with humility. King Kale slowly stepped forward, his eyes lingering on the glowing murals surrounding the chamber. Every image revealed the same lesson. Alpha leaders stood beside healers, never above them. Strength had always been meant to protect restoration, not replace it. He suddenly realized that centuries of ambition had slowly rewritten the very history his kingdom had been built upon. One of the advisors cleared his throat, attempting to recover his confidence. "Your Majesty, regardless of what the temple has shown us, the kingdom still requires order. If word spreads that an ordinary Omega has been chosen above every Alpha who came before, many powerful families will challenge the truth. They will demand that this sanctuary become royal property." Several others quietly nodded, concerned about the uncertainty waiting beyond the mountains. Elena listened without interruption. She understood their fear. Change often frightened people more than failure ever could. Before anyone else could respond, Kale turned toward his advisors with calm determination. His voice was neither angry nor loud, yet every word carried unmistakable authority. "Then they will have to challenge me first." A profound silence settled across the chamber. Even the scholars stopped writing. Throughout his reign, King Kale had earned respect because he weighed every decision carefully, never allowing pride to guide his judgment. Those who knew him best immediately recognized the significance of his words. He was not defending Elena because of an ancient miracle. He was defending the truth the temple itself had revealed. Kale slowly faced the silver tree before continuing. "For generations, our people believed leadership belonged only to those who possessed the greatest strength. We searched for forgotten places hoping they would make us more powerful. Yet this sanctuary has waited 900 years to remind us that true leadership begins by protecting those who restore what others cannot." His silver eyes met Elena's once again, filled with quiet respect rather than admiration alone. "You never sought recognition. You never demanded authority. You simply chose compassion every day, even when no one believed it mattered. That is why the temple welcomed you instead of us." Elena lowered her gaze, overwhelmed by words she had never imagined hearing from an Alpha King. She had spent her entire life believing kindness was too ordinary to change the world. Now the oldest sanctuary in history had revealed the opposite. As if affirming Kale's decision, the silver tree released another gentle cascade of glowing leaves that drifted through the chamber before settling around both of them without touching the floor. The murals along the walls shimmered softly, and one final inscription gradually appeared across the polished stone where moments earlier there had been only blank marble. "The guardian shall never stand alone, for the worthy leader walks beside the healer, never before and never behind." The elderly historian smiled through quiet tears as he finished translating the ancient words. The sanctuary had not only chosen its guardian, it had also recognized the ruler willing to place truth above pride. In that peaceful moment, beneath branches that had witnessed nearly 1,000 years of forgotten history, an Alpha King and an overlooked Omega stood not as ruler and subject, but as two souls entrusted with restoring a future that the world had almost forgotten was possible. Morning sunlight filtered through the crystal ceiling of the sanctuary, painting gentle streams of silver across the ancient chamber. Hours had passed, yet no one felt eager to leave. It was as though the temple had quietly invited every visitor to unlearn the history they thought they understood before allowing them to return to the outside world. Elena wandered slowly among the marble halls, her fingertips brushing carved pillars that seemed strangely familiar despite her never having seen them before. With every step, fragments of memory that did not belong to her own lifetime drifted through her thoughts like reflections upon calm water. She saw generations of guardians welcoming frightened travelers, restoring exhausted forests after harsh winters, healing rivers clouded by sorrow, and standing beside Alpha leaders who understood that compassion was the foundation upon which every lasting kingdom had been built. None of those memories carried fear. They carried peace. Drawn by an unseen presence, Elena entered a quiet circular library hidden behind the chamber of the silver tree. Unlike ordinary libraries, its shelves contained polished crystal tablets instead of books. As she approached the center of the room, one tablet gently lifted from its resting place and floated into her waiting hands. The moment her fingers touched its smooth surface, delicate silver letters appeared across the crystal. Guardian Elena Ashford, last daughter of the sacred restoration lineage. Her breath caught. She stared at the glowing words, unable to look away. Her family had never spoken of noble bloodlines or forgotten guardians. They had lived simple lives, serving neighbors with kindness and expecting nothing in return. Yet another line slowly emerged beneath the first. The final descendants concealed their names among ordinary villages so that humility would survive where pride could not follow. Tears quietly gathered in Elena's eyes. Suddenly, countless small moments from childhood made sense. Her mother's gentle smile whenever Elena restored dying flowers. The old pendant carefully hidden until the proper day arrived. The elderly woman who had whispered that the mountains would one day call her by name. None of it had been coincidence. It had been a promise faithfully protected across generations. Behind her, King Kale entered the library without disturbing the silence. He noticed the glowing tablet and immediately understood that the sanctuary was revealing truths meant only for its chosen guardian. Elena turned toward him, emotion softening her voice. My family never abandoned this place. They protected it by allowing the world to forget them. Kale nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the greatest guardians leave no monuments behind. They leave ordinary lives that quietly preserve extraordinary hope. As they stepped back into the central sanctuary, the silver tree shimmered with renewed brilliance. Its roots released streams of clear water that flowed beyond the chamber, through ancient channels disappearing beneath the mountain. Moments later, one of the royal guards hurried in from the entrance with astonishment written across his face. Your Majesty, the valley is changing. Everyone stepped outside together. Across the once quiet landscape, dormant flowers had awakened in brilliant white bloom. The crystal lake reflected a deeper shade of blue than before, while streams flowed farther into the surrounding forest, bringing life to hillsides that had remained dry for generations. Birds circled joyfully above the temple, and distant evergreens seemed greener beneath the morning light. The sanctuary was not merely revealing its history. It was restoring the land itself. Standing beside Elena, Kale realized that the greatest miracle had never been the opening of ancient gates. The true miracle was that one overlooked soul, who had spent her entire life choosing kindness without expecting recognition, had awakened hope powerful enough to breathe life into an entire kingdom once again. The journey back from the hidden valley felt entirely different from the path that had led them there. The forest no longer seemed wrapped in secrecy. Sunlight poured freely through the towering pines, clear streams crossed the trails with quiet music, and the crisp mountain air carried the fresh scent of new blossoms where only faded undergrowth had existed before. Every traveler understood they were witnessing more than a change in the landscape. They were watching an ancient promise fulfilled. News spread across the northern territories faster than anyone expected. Villages once divided by pride began sharing. Stories of rivers flowing stronger, forgotten orchards blooming again, and forests recovering with surprising speed. Some called it a miracle. Others called it the blessing of the moon. But those who had stood inside the sanctuary knew the truth. None of it had happened because someone had conquered the temple. It had happened because someone had approached it with a heart that never sought recognition. When King Kale returned to the royal capital, the great council gathered immediately. Nobles, scholars, and pack leaders filled the grand chamber, expecting the king to announce the discovery of priceless treasures or forgotten weapons capable of strengthening the kingdom. Instead, Kale stood before them with calm confidence and shared a very different message. He spoke of the sanctuary built by guardians who believed restoration was greater than domination. He spoke of forgotten history that honored healers alongside leaders. Most importantly, he spoke the name of Elena Ashford with the respect reserved for the greatest protectors of the realm. Some members of the council exchanged uncertain glances, but none challenged him. The oldest historians present quietly confirmed every inscription translated within the sanctuary. History itself had spoken. Several weeks later, beneath a clear evening sky illuminated by the full moon, representatives from villages across the kingdom gathered at the restored temple for the first ceremony held there in nearly 9 centuries. Elena stood beneath the silver tree wearing simple white robes embroidered with the ancient crescent symbol carried by her family for generations. She had accepted her role without seeking titles or glory, remaining the same gentle soul who once spent quiet mornings caring for strangers in a small village healing cottage. As the ceremony reached its final moment, King Kale stepped forward before every witness present. Instead of standing above Elena as custom would have expected, he lowered himself onto one knee in quiet respect. His voice carried clearly through the peaceful valley. A kingdom endures not because one ruler stands above everyone else, but because those who restore hope are honored. Beside its leaders, today I do not kneel before power. I kneel before compassion that reminded us who we were always meant to become. No one spoke. Many quietly wiped tears from their eyes as white leaves drifted gently from the ancient silver tree, surrounding both of them in soft moonlit radiance. The sanctuary itself seemed to celebrate the moment with silent grace. From that day forward, children throughout the Northern Territories learned a different version of history. They no longer grew up believing the greatest heroes were only fearless alphas or victorious rulers. They learned about the healer whose quiet kindness awakened a forgotten sanctuary and restored an entire kingdom simply by remaining true to her heart. And long after both Elena and Kale became legends whispered beneath countless moonlit skies, travelers who found the peaceful valley would always discover the same words carved into white stone beside the open gates. True power never ruled through fear. It restored what fear had nearly destroyed.